Today, we become legends.
Hey, my name's Inter, and welcome back to the channel for the OB10 news that we're getting on the Titan Talk. Well, OB10 and God release news as well. We've got OB10 balance that they're going over, as well as a few little bits of news on the next God releases for the game. It was a relatively small reveal and also had one little bit of disappointing news, unfortunately. But yeah, without further ado, and on this epic freeze frame of Clumsy, let's get right into it. So first up, the God roadmap stuff. So the H-God is being delayed, unfortunately. He's not going to be releasing directly after Apollo, which is what they initially planned to. 2 weeks after Apollo. He is going to be delayed. There's also no ETA on when that God is going to release. It's not necessarily meaning it's cancelled or anything like that, but there's no ETA on when that's going to release. But they want to kind of tailor the update around him a little bit more and make the release more of like an actual event, not just like oh, here's the new God. They want to make it like a big themed update around him and stuff like that, which I think is cool. Hopefully that will be a worth payoff for having to wait a little bit longer for the God. They might also be doing, some wacky stuff with his kit. They've been doing that in Smite 2 quite a lot with some really interesting out-of-the-box kits like Aladdin and stuff like that. So yeah, it's unfortunate. The H-God is being delayed. He's not going to be directly after Apollo, but hopefully when he does release, it's going to be a big event and all that kind of stuff. In terms of other gods that are coming, they did only reveal 2. It wasn't like a full-on roadmap really or anything like that, but they revealed Scylla is going to be the next god after Apollo. So 2 weeks after Apollo, we're going to get Scylla in the game, and then also Ganesha is going to be the one after Scylla. So we're getting Scylla, and then we're getting Ganesha. That's all the information we got on gods. Unfortunately, there wasn't like much of a roadmap really. It was just those 2 reveals and the announcement that they're delaying the H-God. However, there will be a flash test tomorrow for Scylla and Ganesha, which is kind of interesting. Travis just revealed that on the show just now, which is kind of interesting. Apparently they're still not done, obviously, but they're playable. So they're going to be allowing us to flash test them tomorrow. Check out Scylla and Ganesha. So that should be a pretty exciting time. We'll probably be streaming some of that. So definitely go follow me on Twitch. Link down below for that. But yeah, that's pretty much all the God news. So let's just jump into the OB10 balance that they're going over at the moment. So first up, they're making some anti-heal item changes. They're sort of giving them additional passives like they had in Smite 1. So Ruinous Tank isn't getting like much of an additional passive really. It's just getting a very similar change to like Mystical Mail and the Void items that they did recently, where it's stronger up close and weaker further away. So if you are like a melee tank with a Ruinous Tank diving onto a healer, if you are within close range of them within 4 meters, you're going to be applying 60% anti-heal to them with 1 item, which is pretty strong. But then of course, if you're a bit further away, it's going to be a lot less useful. Divine Ruin is getting a new passive effect. They have decreased the intelligence on it to compensate for this though, because obviously it was already quite a strong item with it having 105 in. That's quite a lot. So it's down to 85, but they've added a new passive where enemy gods hit by your basic attacks or abilities have the anti-heal, of course, but it also triggers Chain Lightning, damaging the target and up to 4 nearby enemies for some damage. And I don't know if this will trigger the anti-heal. This is how it works in Smite 1. The Divine procs did actually trigger the anti-heal, but it does say enemy gods hit by your basic attacks or abilities have reduced healing, so maybe it won't. Not entirely sure, but that's on an internal cooldown of 20 seconds. Brawler's getting a similar thing, strength down from 65 to 50, but they've also added a new effect. Getting a kill or assist on an enemy god creates a field around you that lasts 6 seconds, providing allies with 5+1 per level strength and intelligence. That's kind of similar to what Brawlers had in Smite 1 as well. And then of course there's Contagion. There's some other new tank items coming as well, but I've already covered those in a previous video. So if you want to check those out, you can check out my most recent OB10 showcase if you want to check out the new items and stuff. But I'm just going to cover the additional balance that we haven't heard about yet. So moving into general item changes, Amanita Charm is getting a small buff. They have increased the tick frequency from 1 second to 0.5, but they decreased the heal from 3.5 to 2. So it is a slight buff to the heal and it also ticks faster. Berserker Shield, they have increased the passive protections from items from 50% to 65%, which is kind of nuts, honestly. This item was already quite good, I think. Obviously, it doesn't continue proccing under 50% health like the old Berserker Shield did. If it did that, then it will probably be a broken item. But 65% protections from item boost is absolutely massive, especially if you can combine this with some of the other new items and some other high protection items in your build. I think the only reason this is even allowed to be a change is because protections are so low on items right now. If this was providing this much before the protection stat squish, where they took everything down by like 25 to 40%, this will probably be broken. But yeah, Berserker Shield getting a big increase to that. I guess one of the major issues with Berserker Shield is that like attack speed warriors generally don't build that many protections, but you could probably just throw this into like a general tank build and you don't even care about the attack speed. Eye of Providence, the warding support active item, they have increased the health from 200 to 250 on that. It's already relatively well statted, to be honest, and you get a lot of economy out of it. I think this item is a little bit underrated. Haste of Vitalis, they have increased the cost cost by 100 and the attack speed by 5%, and they have increased the max stacks from 3 to 4, and now melee basic attacks provide 2 stacks while ranged only provide 1. So yeah, this is a change that I literally called for not too long ago around the time of Callie's release, you know, because it just makes sense that like you want to separate melees and ranged with this kind of item. They're very different beasts in terms of how they use Fatalis. It is much more okay on melee gods than it is on ranged gods, so having some way to differentiate that is good. Hussar's Wings is getting a 200 gold cost decrease and a 100 health increase, which is kind of interesting. This item I think is already quite good, but it's just a little bit situational. Obviously, you only want to build it into multiple heavy slows that are really annoying you, you know, Cupid, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's going to be even more effective at that now. 500 health is pretty substantial. For Mystical Mail, interestingly, they've made an anti-shield item, so enemies take the full amount of bonus damage, you know, regardless of range if they have a health shield on them. So Mystical Mail, a little bit of anti-shield there. They are trying to add more anti-shield into the game. I think Mystical Mail's a little bit of a weird place for it, but sure, that's pretty cool. Pharaoh's Curse, they have increased the attack speed slow from 20% to 40%, which is pretty massive. The slow remains at 20% though. They've also decreased the duration though from 6 seconds to 4 seconds, but also the cooldown from 60 seconds down to 45. So it's going to last a bit less time and you'll have it up more often, but it's also a lot more potent on the attack speed slow. So this is going to be much better at dealing with ADCs in tank builds now, which I think is good. That's one of the main issues right now. ADCs are just so strong, and tanks don't really have a way to deal with that, especially with how low protections are and how much pen is in the game. Spirit Robe is getting buffed, interestingly. I don't know if this is like if they've seen what's been going on recently with tank builds, but I don't think Spirit Robe really needs a buff. It's one of the better tank items in the game right now, but they've increased the protections on it of both kinds by 5. It's not going to break the item or anything, but it is already quite a good item. Probably going to be especially good with a lot of the new tank items that are coming in as well, the percent protection increase kind of stuff, because Spirit Robe, when it does proc, it gives you a lot of protections. It's like one of the highest protection items in the game when its passive does proc. So if you're getting like CC'd and then you lose 50% of your health from the new Freya's Tears item, you're going to be getting a 30% boost on that, 65 I think Spirit Robe provides, maybe it's 70 now. So that's going to be pretty good too, but that is all the item balance that is going to be coming in this update. I think it's reasonable. There's definitely some things missing here. I don't think any of these changes are bad by any means, but I do think there's some things missing from this, in my personal opinion. I think Rage and Demon Blade absolutely need to be hit again. I also think maybe Soul Reaver needs to be hit a little bit as well. And I would maybe buff the protections on some lesser used tank items instead of doing stuff like buffing Spirit Robe and Mystical Mail, you know, that are already heavily used. Even Hussar's Wings isn't heavily used, but it is good when it's good. There's a lot of tank items in the game right now, stuff like Genji's Guard, that you just really never want to build, and I wish they would kind of, you know, either add new options or buff those options, because at the moment they're just kind of like buffing stuff that people already use, which in a way is useful because, you know, you're already using those items. It's just going to make your build more powerful, which is probably what we need a little bit for tanks right now. You don't want to go too overboard, obviously. You don't want to go back to where we were 3 patches ago, but I do think tanks could use something. But I wish they would pay a little bit more attention to some of the lesser used tank items that no one uses and no one has used for a long time, because they're just kind of trash. And then also, yeah, Rage, Demon Blade definitely need to be hit. Crit is ridiculous right now, and probably a small hit to Soul Reaver as well. I would have liked to see too. But yeah, overall, no particularly bad changes here, just a few things missing that I probably would have put there. Moving into some god balance though, first up, Baron Samedi is getting a buff. This makes sense. He's been pretty terrible for a while. His 3 now scales down from 16 down to 14, which is absolutely massive. His 3 is practically his entire kit, obviously, because it just combos straight into his 2 and 1. Your 2 and 1 are on much lower cooldowns than 16 seconds, so this basically means, you know, more often you're just going to be able to hit that full combo for free because your 3 is going to be up more often, so that's a really big buff there. And then also Life of the Party, they have increased the slam damage and intelligence scaling by about 75 at all ranks. No, 75 scaling down to 5, so mostly in the early game, and then also 15% more scaling on that. So yeah, some solid Baron Samedi buffs, and you know, this is obviously going to be much more relevant for like a mid-damage Baron Samedi, which is where he's worst right now. You know, he's best in support, really. Cernan also getting some buffs. The Aspect bonus cooldown reduction now applies when hitting jungle monsters at a reduced amount on his 3, so you get 2 seconds instead of 4 seconds, but that's going to allow you to, you know, use the 3 and like cancel it or whatever to help his jungle clear, which is interesting. I do feel like Cernanos Aspects is generally better as a bruiser than it is as a full damage like jungler, but maybe you could make it like a bruiser jungle Cernanos Aspect work, maybe. It's a lot of fun, but I feel like they should just add another component to this aspect rather than just like buffing the components that already exist. I feel like it needs something else, you know, change the ultimate or the 2 or something like that. And then in general, across both forms, I think is what this means. They have increased the damage of Horn Charge, mostly in the early rank, so at rank 1 it's going to be doing substantially more. Hunbat's getting some changes, some buffs actually. Aspect of Disruption, the Overhand Smash, they have increased the base damage. It's 50 up to 170, it's now 60 up to 220. Not sure I want to see this, to be honest. I don't feel like adding damage back to Aspect Bats is the way. It's not going to break him or anything, you know, this little bit of extra damage, but it's probably not going to be irrelevant. And then on regular bats, they have increased the strength per stack from 2 to 5 on infused strikes, and as 1 now deals increased damage. This also affects the second hit, obviously. So yeah, some relatively small bats buffs overall. I do think he could probably use a little bit, you know, that change that he made to his ultimate not too long long ago where it has a maximum fear duration of 1 second just really kind of killed the character. You know, he's still usable, but he's really not particularly amazing. Loki getting a small buff to the damage scaling on his one as well, 10 to 15% per tick. This ticks 4 times, I think, so an extra 20% scaling. That's not too bad. Loki could probably use a small buff. He's not amazing. Nuwa getting some buffs, which I don't love, but Clay Soldiers, they have increased the dash damage intelligence scaling. They've doubled it, actually, and Shining Metal, they have increased the explosion damage scaling from 30% to 40%. So that Nuwa combo is just going to be hitting for quite a bit more scaling. About 17.5% more on a full combo, I guess, because you're going to get 3 soldier dashes and then the explosion. So a little bit more Nuwa scaling there. At least they're not buffing like the soldier health or anything like that. Yamoja getting some buffs as well, which is interesting. You know, Yamoja's always an interesting case. You know, it feels like she's permanently really strong at the top level of play, but then, you know, most people can't really use that well, and she ends up getting buffs, especially when there's no Pro League to bounce around. But they are buffing the shield health and scaling on Mending Waters by about 10 base damage at all ranks, 10 base shield health at all ranks, and also from 2% of her max health to 4% of her max health, which is kind of nuts, you know, because max health builds are so good right now, especially in support with Gauntlet of Thebes and stuff like that. Jesse's Hexstone, a really strong item, but Bassar's Wings is getting more health, Contagion's coming out with 500 health. You know, this could be kind of scary, man. Especially because, in my opinion, Yamoja's already quite good. And then also her ultimate, they've decreased the cooldown from 140 scaling down to 120. It's now just 120 at all ranks, which is pretty massive for a early game. This ultimate's incredibly powerful. It's arguably the best ultimate in the game, so reducing its cooldown is going to be huge for her. Merlin is getting a shift. His Aspect of Pandemonium, they have decreased the intelligence buff scaling from 1 per level to 0.5 per level, and also increased the cooldown from 15 seconds to 20 seconds on his ultimate. So yeah, Aspect Merlin was generally overperforming quite a bit, especially with like the Phoenix Shield builds, which you could argue is maybe an issue with Phoenix Shield in itself, but it's also just obviously he's going to be a really good user of item procs like that. And then for all forms of Merlin, I assume this is the Eclipse 1A, decreased the cooldown from 14 seconds to 12 seconds. The 2 and 5 stance Radiate, they have increased the per tick damage and intelligence scaling by about 1 up to 5, depending on rank, base damage, and also 1% scaling. And this is the burn dot damage, not the ticking channel damage. That's the dot that applies afterwards. And then also Dragonfire 2B, they have decreased the cooldown on it from 19 down to 17. It's now just 16 seconds, which I think is fine. That is already a very long cooldown for an ability that requires setup. You know, if you don't have setup for it and you waste it, you know, it's kind of going to do nothing. So I think that's probably fine. Aladdin getting some nerfs, this makes total sense. You know, ever since they made those like shifts to Aladdin where like his ultimate does damage now, and they kind of fixed his leap to be a little bit better, he's really shot back into the meta, become a top ban again. So his one, they have increased the cooldown from 11 seconds to 13, totally justified. This ability hits insanely hard with the current build, so yeah, it should not be on an 11-second cooldown, I don't think. Maybe 13 scaling down to 11 at most, but yeah, I'm fine with it going up to 13 seconds as well. They've increased the mana cost from 65 up to 85. It's now 85 at all ranks. That's an interesting change. And they have also decreased the returning small damage by about 10 base damage at all ranks, and the large damage by 20 at all ranks. So yeah, just a damage nerf, mana cost nerf, cooldown nerf all on Aladdin's one. This ability does hit insanely hard, and there's no real commitment to it, you know, the way there is like it's 3 or it's 2 when you kind of go in. Willix getting some nerfs as well. Willix is also quite strong, bit of a counter to Aladdin, obviously, but yeah, just strong in general. Further set, they've increased the cooldown from 8 to 9 seconds, which I think is fine. 8 seconds is already very low for an ability that does this much damage and gives immunity frames and stuff like that. Moonlight Charge, they've increased the cooldown from 12 seconds. It's 14 down to 12 now, which I think is fine. Gravity Surge, they've decreased the base damage a little bit, and then also decreased the strength scaling on it too by 10%. Kabrakan getting a nerf, they have decreased the base damage of his 2 from 70 up to 270. It's now 50 up to 270. So the same late game, but yeah, it's actually a really smart change. If you ever laned against Kabrakan in solo lane, you know how ridiculous this thing is in the early levels when he's just got 1 point in it, because he can slam you with it twice and then also stun you with no DR. It's an incredibly strong ability in the early ranks. This is actually a really smart change. This thing can be super oppressive in the early learning phase of solo from Kabrakan, so I think that's a really good change. Hades getting some nerfs as well. Obviously, Hades probably the best solo laner in the game right now after all the tank nerfs. He doesn't care about those, obviously. He doesn't build tanks, so he's really good. He was already quite good before all of these changes. It just made him even better. Devour Souls, they've decreased the base heal on it from 20 up to 80. It's now 10 up to 70, so you know, in the later ranks, not as big of a deal, but in the first rank, it's literally halving the healing that you're getting from this, so until you start putting some points into it, it's going to be much less healing. And then also Pillar of Agony, they have decreased the protections gain from 50 to 110. It's now 30 to 110, so yeah, going to be less scary at level 5. I still think, honestly, the top end of this could come down. It's kind of a ridiculous amount of protections to give to him for free, I think. Like, this was probably fine in Smite 1, where Hades, all he does is just press his ultimate, sit there and do nothing and hope that people don't jump out of it. But in Smite 2, where he can dash around and 3 you and silence you into it and stuff, I don't think it needs this many protections, even at the max rank. This could go down to like 80 or something. Makes him unreasonably tanky, especially because, you know, protections are so hard to come by in Smite Smite 2. 110 protections in Smite 2 is a lot more of a big deal than it was in Smite 1. So yeah, this could definitely come down at the top end, I think, as well. So about getting some nerfs as well, it's 2 and 3 both going up by 1 second cooldown. I do think they should probably hit the pluck cooldown up by like 1 or 2 seconds as well. I know it's already on quite a long cooldown. It was on 14 at launch, I think, or maybe even 12, and now it's on 16. But it's just such an incredibly powerful ability in the one relic system. It just kills you a lot of the time. So I think honestly taking that up to like 17 or 18 seconds on pluck, that's probably what he needs. But still, this is good. Obviously, Sobek did need some nerfs. He's one of their best performing tanks. Sol also getting some changes. The Aspect 3, they have decreased the damage and intelligence scaling from 90 to 250 plus 60%. It's now 80 to 240 plus 50%. So just 10 base damage and 10% scaling off of that. And yeah, I think this is fine. Aspect Sol 3 does hit incredibly hard. So taking some damage off of that is good. So yeah, again, I think these God balance changes, much like the Iron balance changes, they're mostly good changes here, I think. But I do think there are some things that are definitely missing from this. You know, no Guan Yu nerfs, no Aspect Agni nerfs, no Barry nerfs, no Afro nerfs. They're definitely still missing a few of these things. Maybe some Milan buffs or whatever. But they're not bad changes by any means. It's definitely going to be beneficial for the game for sure. It's just there's definitely a few things missing that they really just need to hit in terms of a lot of the top performing gods. You know, Guan Yu, Kali, Aspect Agni, Afro, Barry, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, overall, pretty solid balance changes, I would say. I just wish they kind of hit a few more things. But yeah, let me know what you think about these down below, and I will catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.